to take just a moment to thank you from the operations side of the house for all the work you guys have done over the years. I think sometimes we don't take enough time to spend with our tech side of the operation in the fire service and law enforcement, and let you know what it means to us for all the work you've done over the years to make our job, boots on the ground, easier and better over the years. I wanted to share an experience with you, I think, that demonstrates that I just had this summer. Even though I'm an administrator now and don't get a lot of opportunity to spend time in the field, I still am a strike team leader in the wildland arena, and this summer, as we drew down resources, I got tapped to lead a fairly unique strike team to the Monterey area. The strike team was made up of 3 different operational areas and 5 different fire departments. So 5 engines, basically from 5 different fire departments, with 5 different comm platforms, if you will, to work off of, different IT platforms even to work off of. And we got sent to Monterey into an area where we knew nothing about their comm capabilities. And even our comm folks in our area were concerned that we were going to struggle going down to Monterey. And I got to tell you that as we got down there and we began to look and see what we all had on our individual pieces of equipment and figure out how we could make our interoperability work, we initially found out that our strike team was very, very easily able to take all those fire departments and work on common channels before we arrived in Monterey. As we got to Monterey, I made contact with the command center in Monterey, and within about 5 minutes, and I got to share this dynamic, they spread my engines out over 100 miles in Monterey, all the way from Hollister down to almost San Luis Obispo. I had my engines spread out, and I'm thinking, how am I going to manage and monitor all these engines running calls? Within 5 minutes, the Monterey command center took my smartphone and plugged in all of my resources, plugged it into their CAD system, and from that day on, for the 4 days we were in Monterey, I was able to keep track of every single engine in my strike team, even though I was spread out 100 miles from them. When they got dispatched to an incident, I knew where they were going, I knew when they were going, I knew what their incident number was, I knew what channel they were working on. I could go to my radio, get on the channel they were on, and monitor and talk with them. It was a phenomenal experience for me to leave our area where we're comfortable working with our little 800 megahertz system and once in a while on VHF, and go and work in a multi-radio platform. It was a phenomenal experience. It didn't end there though. 4 days in, we got sent an initial attack to the Ponderosa fire up in Red Bluff from Monterey. So we went from all of those dynamics of working in Monterey to being sent to a completely different part of the state, different region, different radio platforms, with no support because the fire was in initial stages, and we were able to, through cloning our own radios and working with the dispatch center in the Red Bluff area, we were able to seamlessly transition from Monterey to Red Bluff and go on to an active fire line with no radio communication issues whatsoever. I got to tell you, from a end user, operational, boots on the ground perspective, that is phenomenal that we can do that in this state almost anywhere. And I got confidence now, a lot more confidence, having experienced it, that I think I could probably go anywhere in the state and have a similar experience to that. And I think that's largely due to the long time work that you guys in this group have done over the years to make sure that we at the end user have interoperability and the opportunity to be successful on the incidents that we have to run. 9/11 highlighted that for the whole nation. I think what makes me proud to work in California is that California was well ahead of the curve even in 2001. And I think the rest of the country largely it's following California's lead. And I think to your predecessors and to you guys now, that's a huge compliment in moving our state forward from the standpoint of comms for our end users, fire, police, EMS. That's an awesome thing. Just another quick little story that just happened this weekend that demonstrates the interoperability between disciplines, or I should say over the New Year weekend. Most of you heard about the shooting down in Old Sacramento, and that shooting in Old Sacramento was across two disciplines, fire and law enforcement. The interoperability of the radio system was absolutely critical and key in that incident because we had unknown circumstances with firefighters being sent into an unclear area. We were instantly and seamlessly able to talk with law enforcement to understand what their operation and concerns were, and keep our people safe in a relatively unsafe environment. I read after action reports from places like Aurora and those kind of places, that even the recent one that happened in New York. I got to tell you, it makes me feel comfortable to work in Sacramento, in Northern California, and in California emergency services, because we don't experience a lot of the things that we see highlighted in those after-action reports. And that's due largely to your group. And so from an operations standpoint, our hats are off to you. Thank you very much for all the work you've done. We appreciate it a lot. And I don't understand it, but I know when I key the mic and I want to talk to an engine that prison from my agency, I'm going to talk to them. Or I want to talk to a police officer, I'm going to talk to them. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Capital Region Chapter, and I was just discussing here what that entails. Capital Region covers 24 counties, I think similar to your area. So we start down in Stanislaus County up to the Oregon border over to the Nevada border. So it's about roughly a third geographically of California. Red Cross is broken up into regions, so we have the largest geographically. Population-wise, obviously, LA, Bay Area, San Diego. We have a couple smaller regions, but those are the main ones. So I was going to just kind of give you an overview of what the Red Cross does, mostly in disaster. Feel free to raise your hand anytime to ask questions, and I will take questions at the end. I know there's been a lot going on. You know, the biggest thing that the Red Cross is known for is disasters. So I'll be focusing on that and talking about how we use volunteers. Mostly, the Red Cross is 97% volunteer-based. So yeah, we do have some employees like myself, but for the most part, they are volunteers like yourself. So we'll be talking about some volunteer opportunities also. We were going to have a couple people here with me today, but because, again, Hurricane Sandy, it's so huge, we have people going back for 2 and 3 times. So our emergency services director, who is also going to be here with me today, got called back. It wasn't, you know, it was mandatory, basically. They called from Washington, D.C. and said, please, you know, you need to get on a plane right now. So even though the story's out of the media, it's still going on. All total, we had over 6,000 people deployed to Hurricane Sandy at one time, and right now we still have about 1,000 people there. As a country. Locally, out of the Capital Region, we deployed about 160 people, and right now we still have 19 people. Again, this is one of those jobs that was so huge, it's going to go on for a long time. We will be doing some long-term recovery, so it'll continue on. People sometimes are confused about the Red Cross, thinking that we're part of the federal government. We're not, but we have the unique position where we do have a Congressional Charter. And what that means is we are mandated to do certain things by the federal government, yet we get no federal funds. So all of our funding comes from our corporate partners, but most of it comes from small donations from individuals across the country. We are allowed to apply for grants like other nonprofits, but you know, really a small amount of money comes from that. And again, a lot of confusion comes from how we spend our money and where our money comes from. The Red Cross is really broken down into 3 divisions. We have our blood division. We don't do blood here in Sacramento. We have Blood Source, and we partner with Blood Source. So our blood, but we are the largest company that does blood services in the country. So, and it is a business. So a large amount of our operating costs come from our blood division. Then we have our health and safety division, which are the people who give CPR classes, first aid classes, first responder classes, things like that. And again, that operates as a business and contributes to our operating costs. The 3rd division is out of the chapters, and this is where the disaster services come from, our military services, things like that. So when you give money to the Red Cross, it's going in that pot. So where our CEO and of the Red Cross, or my salary and the staff salaries are coming from those other 2 divisions and from corporate donations. We have a lot of generous companies here in this area, PG&E, Oracle, Granger, who give donations to us. So our operating costs really come out of that. But when you donate money to a disaster, it goes to the disaster. So basically, I'm not going to read all this, but what Congress has told us that we need to do is to protect victims in conflicts and in disasters, provide family communication, support the U.S. military, and work with FEMA and work under the FEMA framework. So most of our volunteers and employees are trained just like a FEMA employee would be, police, fire. We still follow incident command, the incident command system. Oh, and one person I want to introduce back there, Jordan, who's standing up. Wave, Jordan. He also would be up here doing this, except he's not technically our employee yet. Jordan works here at Cal EMA in communications, and he is going to be our new director of communications starting on the 22nd, right? On the 22nd. So he's coming on board. We're happy to have him. Can't wait, because we need him. So how the Red Cross calls it, how do we get to a disaster? Couple of ways. Some of you, do we have any dispatch people here? Okay, yes, sometimes each city, each county, each state tends to do things a little bit differently. But sometimes somebody calls dispatch and says, call the Red Cross. And then we get our calls from dispatch. On a bigger disaster, we may get called into action by our Disaster Operations Center. And the big picture you're seeing up there is our Disaster Operations Center in Washington, D.C. It can be by the county. If the county has opened up their Emergency Operations Center, they call us into action. So we never self-deploy. We're called either by a local entity, by like fire or police, by county OES, state. We quite often work at Cal EMA. I don't know if anybody's been over to the State Operations Center across the hall. We operate out of there, and of course with FEMA. What we do locally every day, for the most part, most of our volunteers are going out on fires every day. So if there's a fire and everything's destroyed, the people have no resources whatsoever, the Red Cross is called in. What we do is we provide that family with emergency services. And again, sometimes there's confusion. We're not a social service, we're an emergency service. So if they need a place to stay, we provide 3 nights lodging. If all their clothes are burned, we provide them with a debit card to buy an outfit. If all their food was burned, we provide them with a debit card to buy food for 3 days. So really it's a kind of to fill that gap between the emergency that they've suffered and to get on to social services if that's what they need, or to connect with their insurance company or whatever. And again, like I said, each entity does it a little bit differently. Most of the fire departments here, the battalion chief would call dispatch and they would call our emergency services. Everybody does it a little bit differently. Sometimes these disasters get a little bit bigger. 2 incidents that we did last year, the Lincoln tanker car fire up in Lincoln, that turned into a larger operation, although it was still run by the city fire department. So we went up there. We sit in the Emergency Operations Center. In that case, it was just at the incident command at the fire station. They had a joint information center open. We were there. But even though it was run locally, everybody was there. The Secretary of Cali MA was there, the county people were there. So they were there observing and watching and offering assistance, but it was still, you know, it's just considered what we consider a larger local incident. The one below that, a police incident down in Modesto, if you recall, down in Stanislaus County when the police were serving someone in, what was it, in the officer, or the locksmith, yeah, that one, where he got killed, and there was that standoff. So again, they had to evacuate whole neighborhoods. What do you do with all those people? And during the day, same thing with the Lincoln tanker fire incident. People are gone to work, they come home, they can't get to their homes. What do they do? Where do they go? You know, most people, I would assume that pretty much everybody in here, you have some place to go. You have somewhere, someone to take care of you. But that's not true for everybody. And the other important thing is getting information. A lot of times our evacuation centers and our shelters are points of information where people gather, and you know, the police, the fire, FEMA, everybody comes in and makes that the place where information is disseminated, the media. So we were actually down in Modesto a couple days because they weren't, people could not get back into their homes. So we will, again, open up evacuation centers and shelters. Again, every local jurisdiction does it differently, each county. We have, across the country, what's called the National Shelter System. So we have places, and everywhere around here, probably your local community center, your local church, whatever. All of those places have already been surveyed and entered into our national shelter system. So we don't have to say, oh my gosh, where do we go? We say, here's the incident, where's the closest place, we can open it. And again, in Sacramento County, for example, we have a very close relationship with the mass care people there. We're, you know, talking on the phone, we're both in the shelter system together, it's done. In some counties, the counties like to make that decision. We will open the shelter here, Red Cross come and assist us. In different states, it's run differently. In New Orleans, in Louisiana, in New York, the state is responsible for shelters. So, you know, we have to, you know, work with each jurisdiction a little bit differently. Then large disasters like Hurricane Sandy, the tornadoes in Joplin here. What we do is that, again, all disasters are local. They start local and grow when, you know, it's grown beyond the capacity of the local jurisdiction. So we kind of operate the same way. The local Red Cross chapter will handle it. When it gets too big for them, they will call in for assistance from surrounding chapters and regions. When it gets too big for that, then we call in for more assistance. And that's usually when our national organization steps in. And again, to, you know, for the donated dollar, we're really careful with that. So we call people from the region first. So for example, in New York, when Hurricane Sandy hit, they knew it was going to be huge. They knew they were going to have to pull people from all across the country. But you start local first. You fill the jobs close to home, and then when you still have jobs open up, that's when you start reaching across the country. And again, some people are specially trained, and I'll talk more about that, the jobs in a minute. But you know, if someone's highly specialized, got some specialized training, they get pulled in really early. Again, our workforce, 97% volunteers. We're really fortunate in the Sacramento area, being in the state capital. A lot of people can retire early from state government. So we have, you know, a lot of people coming in from Sacramento volunteering. So we usually send a lot of people out from this area. Mass care sheltering. So the main thing that the Red Cross does is sheltering. This, again, when I talked about the shelter, a lot of things happen in there besides people just sleeping. So there's obviously people going in there to sleep, people going in there to eat, people who need some child care done, who need assistance. I'll talk a little bit about nursing and mental health. So every shelter has a nurse, every shelter has a mental health worker in it. And we get assistance from all kinds of people. What we also try and do is involve the people who are in the shelter. So some people are there and just stay there the whole time and have nowhere to go. So we try to involve those people and get them, and give them a little job to do and things to do at the shelter. A lot of times people still have to go to work, so they may sleep there, leave, and the shelter may be kind of empty during the day, but then after work gets filled up. Feeding. We feed lots of people. I think we were at, oh my gosh, I want to say millions of meals, over 7 million meals, I think even more than that for Hurricane Sandy, what we're at right now. So, I mean, we're talking millions and millions of meals. A couple ways that is done. If the small vehicle that kind of is the size of an ambulance, we call our emergency response vehicles. Those are the ones that actually go out on the road and deliver food either to a neighborhood corner, house to house, different ways. So the food is cooked in large kitchens and then put on those ERVs, the emergency response vehicles, and taken out into the neighborhoods. Sometimes we have places where people come to us to get food. Sometimes they're done on large trucks. You can see this large truck here is capable of getting together large amounts of meals and then putting them on the trucks. Bulk distribution, all the stuff that needs to go out. We got a picture of a warehouse full of stuff. Well, that stuff needs to get taken out to the people. And what you're seeing here in the other picture is a Red Cross volunteer delivering blankets and other essential needs to the people where they are. So 2 ways things are distributed. Once a disaster gets going, and usually assistance centers are kind of set up, but that's kind of a week or 2 weeks into the job. People's, the word gets out, oh, go to so-and-so church, and you could get all your needs met. You could talk to FEMA, you could talk to Red Cross, you can get a meal, you can get information. But at the very beginning, we need to go out there. We're gathering information. A lot of times when the food is loaded up on those trucks and people are out there passing out blankets, they're gathering information from people. Did you know in that house there's an elderly woman who's been in there and no one's seen her? Did you know that? So we gather that information and pass it on to the people who need it and hopefully save some lives. Client casework. After a couple days in, we're making sure people have a place to sleep, they're warm, they've been fed. Now we go in and really assess how bad the damage was to their home, how bad their needs are. We work up a case on them and work with them one-on-one to help meet their needs. Again, I talked about health and mental health. Every shelter has a nurse who can perform basic first aid, but in the state, across the country, all of our nurses have current licenses. They're either RNs or EMTs. And they need to be a nurse or EMT, you have to be currently licensed in the state in which you reside. Same thing for mental health workers. You have to have a current license in the state in which you reside. So a lot of our nurses are retired. Most of our mental health workers are still in practice. These are the first people who go out, and these are the people we usually have a shortage of because they're so needed, especially in something like Sandy where you have massive amounts of people. The mental health work is going to go on for weeks and months. So that we really have a shortage, and those are the volunteers that we're really trying to recruit. Logistics, how to get all that stuff out there. Locally, every chapter has warehouses. We have several warehouses in our region, but there are larger warehouses scattered throughout the country. So we're able to move things quickly and get them to different areas. Also, we rely on our corporate partners, close to the area. For instance, when we were at the Lincoln Tanker Car Fire, Walmart showed up with pallets of water. Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, especially when you're talking about cleanup things, in flood situations, tornado situations, our corporate partners like Home Depot show up with shovels rakes and things like that. So we're able to distribute that out to the people. Staffing, again, it's really our volunteers, the goodness of the American people who put their time in. There's just no way to do it without them. Technology, where you guys come in, most of you in here. There's different volunteer jobs for technology. There are people who do networking. There are people who do communications work. We have our amateur radio groups, all of those. Usually when you have a big job going on, like a national sized job, we're going into large empty buildings, empty Walmarts, empty Piggly Wigglies, places like that. So all you do, you only have the shell of a building, and that has to become an operating headquarters within hours. So we need people who have those skills to be able to go in and network those buildings. And the computers, everybody who a lot of people who go out on disasters are provided a laptop and a cell phone on the job. So they need to be able to make sure everything is formatted and get that equipment out and make sure it's operating properly. We have a couple of these, what we call emergency response vehicles, scattered across the country. These vehicles are on an expedition platform, and they obviously have satellites attached to them. So really what we use these for, if everything is shut down, there's no phone lines, there's no cell, there's no power, there's no nothing. There's no way to communicate at all. These trucks can go in and provide those services for people, and first responders also. External relations. That is working with mostly our government partners and our community partners. So again, like I said, at all these operations centers, we have people stationed. We have someone at the FEMA Operations Center, the state here at the State Operations Center, at the county level or the local level, depending on what size it is. So we have a representative there to work with them and let, go back and forth and let them know what we're doing. And then if they have needs that aren't met, they can communicate that to us and we can help fulfill those needs. Also in community partners, the Red Cross can't do this all by themselves. So we have other groups that we work with, which I'll talk about in a minute. Public affairs, a big part of our job, getting the word out that there are people in need. You have to remind people, we need donations. So it's the stories that get out there that, you see on the TV, people's homes destroyed. That's when people step into action and start to donate. So we have, again, it's not all employees, it's volunteers who are trained to do public affairs. We have a public affairs volunteer pretty much on if the media is going to show up to the event, we have a public affairs person there. If it's, an apartment fire, anything, we have local volunteers trained to do that. And again, we're seeing, at Sandy Hook, you saw Anderson Cooper interviewing a Red Cross volunteer in public affairs. So we're there to get the word out. Our Disaster Operations Center in Washington, D.C., a couple pictures of that. We are fortunate enough to get some important visitors there. This is when President Obama was there last. He's also, Michelle was there with him. So talking to the Red Cross, thanking them, giving them encouragement. Something new for us is our Digital Operations Center. This was actually highlighted, I believe, in one of your trade magazines. The Digital Center was on the cover. I can't remember the name of the magazine, but it's on one of the government technology magazines. So this, social media is becoming so important in this world. We tweet just out of our region. We tweet a couple times a day. We have, our Facebook account. Now, if you go to the Red Cross, you just go to redcross.org, and that will link you to your local chapter. So there's, we're in the information age. Really, what a lot of things that they're doing here in our Digital Operations Center is monitoring the situation, because that's how information gets out. So they know if somebody on Staten Island is tweeting, we have not had anything to eat in a day, they can pick that message up and take care of that situation. So really what they're monitoring is messaging coming in just as much, if not more, than sending messages out. And again, the Red Cross has really been in the forefront, was in the forefront of text donations. So really it came out with Haiti. That was the big one. You just text and it automatically charges $10 to your cell phone bill. And government partners. Obviously, these are the biggies, but we work with all kinds of government partners. Obviously, FEMA, Cal EMA here, the county, the cities, everybody else, working on making plans, exercising, so we've done it before. It feels familiar when something happens. Community partners, one of the big ones for feeding is the Southern Baptist Convention. They have the best food. I hate to say it. So yeah, Red Cross, I try and sidestep the Red Cross and go to the Southern Baptist. They have better food. But we work with other partners too. We can't do it by ourselves. So Salvation Army, Southern Baptist, Save the Children, all of those people were all talking to each other, planning with each other, exercising, and out there together coordinating to get people's needs met. One of the things to prepare for disasters in preparedness is working under the FEMA's whole community planning. So again, they tell you the government can't save everybody. The government's not going to pay for everything. It's really up to people to take responsibility for themselves. And so, the thing that everyone is working on now is to get the whole community involved in planning for disasters and emergencies. The good news is, it's not just disasters and emergencies. When you get to know your neighbors, get to know the resources available to you and to each other, you can do all kinds of things. So this is kind of trickled down again. So think about your neighborhood right now, where you live. People tend to not know their neighbors as well as they used to, but think about what your neighbors could provide for you in emergency, and vice versa. Do you have a generator? If not, maybe your neighbor does. Do you have a lot of water stored up? Maybe you do, but your neighbor doesn't. What about, if the grocery store shuts down and there's no food? What if you're out of gas and the gas station pumps aren't working because the power's out? Who's stored up gas? So you don't have to do everything by yourself. You can work with your neighbors and your neighborhood to start thinking about preparedness. One of the things that we're working on here in the local area is that resilient community. So working with the first responders, working with community groups, government, getting them all together and helping to get neighborhoods prepared. One small example is our new Fire Stopper program. What we're doing, we're piloting it in Oak Park, a needy neighborhood, and we're working with Sacramento Fire, with us, and the Oak Park community groups. And what we're doing is we're getting fire safety information out to the neighborhoods, canvassing the neighborhoods, and then inviting people to come to a community event. At that community event, they'll get more in-depth information. A firefighter will help them learn how to use a fire extinguisher. We'll let the kids, climb on the trucks, do a tour of the fire station. But then when they go home, after they've gone through all the educational stations, they get to go home with a fire extinguisher, carbon monoxide detector, a surge protector, a smoke detector, some other things. So then they've helped make their neighborhood safer, and hopefully the fire rates, our goal is to make the fire rates in that neighborhood go down. Other things we're doing tomorrow, We have a meeting with the city manager talking about resilient communities and what we can do to gather everyone together, the residents, the store owners, the neighborhood associations, the first responders, how we can get them to think about their community holistically and what they can do to help each other. It may not be for a disaster. Maybe they've all decided that we need a stoplight on the corner. Maybe they've decided that we need the graffiti cleaned up. Well, that's a place to start where they're learning to work together, and then we can spread that messaging out to say, you know what, let's take the next step. Let's start talking about disasters in your area and what could possibly happen. So like I said, my partner in crime here today was supposed to be Tony. He got called out back to Sandy. I've been on several national deployments, lots of local things too, and I'm ready to take questions. Whatever you want to know. Yes?
Obviously, we knew Sandy was coming.
Yes.
You know, it was all predicted and so forth. Do you pre-deploy or start gathering things up ahead of time so that
Yes.
they're in spot?
Yes. Well, yes and no. Yes, we do. Everything's pre-positioned.
Yeah.
But people were really, especially in hurricane situations, so we pull our people out of the area until the hurricane makes landfall for their safety, and then the people come back in. So yes, things are pre-positioned. We, here in the local area, you know, we have trailers filled with supplies pre-positioned over many of the counties here. So like South Lake Tahoe, North Shore, you know, every county has something. We have several trucks. We have a huge warehouse here in Sacramento, smaller ones, Stanislaus, San Joaquin, things like that. So yes, things are pre-positioned, definitely. Yes?
So in the event of a disaster, we get a lot of phone calls inside the comm center. People want to help. You know, they just are spontaneous volunteers. We usually just refer to the Red Cross. But do you have a system in place to accept, like, I don't know, for lack of a better word, somebody spontaneously wants to volunteer?
Yeah. One of the community partners we work with here is Community Link, the Hands on Sacramento. So all of the, a lot of the nonprofits involved in disaster are part of a coalition group called Volunteer Organizations in Aid to Disaster. And so the Community Link, or Hands on Sacramento, takes the spontaneous volunteers and then trains them and gets them out into the community. So they wouldn't, you know, they may or may not be sent to the Red Cross, but they could be sent to other organizations who are doing work for the disaster. So yeah, and most of our, I mean, our volunteers are pretty highly trained. You know, you can't just say, oh, I want to go. You know, you have to have some basic training on sheltering and feeding and things like that. And then as you, you know, figure out what you like doing, then you can get more specialized training. So a lot of people say, you know, there is no way that I could ever work in a shelter. You know, I can't deal with that. It's just too much. I will never do that. And then the person next to them says, oh my God, I love working in the shelter. That's the best thing. I want to be there with the people. I want to listen to their stories. I want to give them hugs. So, you know, everybody kind of picks and chooses. Like, you know, and I like working in operations centers. I think it's interesting. I like the big picture view of it. I had a volunteer here a couple months ago who thought that's what she wanted to do. We were doing an exercise across the hall in the State Operations Center. She was there for about an hour. And she said, you know what, Christy, I told you I'd be here all day, but I hate this. This is horrible. I've got to go. I said, that's fine. That's why you're here, to try it out. And, you know, good thing you found out in an exercise and not in a disaster. So there are, I mean, the jobs are limitless, really, because a lot of, you know, if you're a networking internet person and that's what you love to do and you want to get involved in that with the Red Cross, great. But again, there's some people who say, you know what, I go to work every day and do that. I want to do something different. I want to hand dinner to somebody. That's all I want to do. So, I mean, we get it both ways. People who continue on with their skill set from their jobs and just bring that in a volunteer capacity, and people who say, you know what, I've worked for whatever 40 years, I'm done. I want to do something completely different. So we've got something for everybody. To become a volunteer, of course, we're always encouraging volunteers. Just go to our website. The first step is to come to a volunteer orientation. Just go to redcross.org, and like I said, that will direct you to the local website. You can sign up for a volunteer orientation class online. They'll give you an overview. I focused on disaster today, but this is just a small component of what we do in our chapters every day. So they'll really give you an overview of what we do in the chapters and other areas of the Red Cross. And, you know, you can kind of say, oh, I want to work with the military, or, you know, I want to be a CPR instructor, or I want to do something else. So really that's the first step. If you decide that you want to become a disaster worker, again, there's like basic training classes that you go through, and then between more education and more experience, you kind of work your way up. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much.